Shalom Yesharala. First and foremost, I want to give all praises and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Ruach Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessing to those Akim that's preached the word in all truth and sincerity, along to Israelite foreigner brothers that are like the heathens. But the line of false side goes back to the nation of Israel, which the nation of Israel are you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans through the prophecies and curses of Deuteronomy 28 chapter and throughout the Bible. So this is Brother Yakar of my particular video, and today's video will be entitled, There is no respect of persons with the Most High. I was going to go on some precepts and Lord willing, you brothers and your sisters out there be edified through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shemon Shai, you know. And I'm going to start off in the book of Romans, chapter 2 and verse 11. And it reads, For there is no respect of persons with Yahweh. And that's right, because the Lord doesn't show favoritism to with man or woman. If the Lord doesn't care what status, what type of status you have, um, in this world, and just there there is no respect of persons. Let's just see what Google says. Um, it says, for there is no respect of person with Yahweh, meaning God is completely impartial, showing no favoritism based on race, social status, nationality, or wealth. He judges based on righteousness in the heart, offering the same access to salvation and grace to all people, which is not to all people, all Israelites, beginning with the elect, regardless of outward appearance. Right, you know. So the Lord doesn't show favoritism, and we understand that the Lord judges all age groups, you know, judges everybody, beginning with us first and foremost because we are the Lord's chosen people, and when you read in Ezekiel 9 and 4, and this is an account when the Lord, has sent the angel to go and destroy, the wicked Israelites back then, during the time of Ezekiel, which he was a prophet in the Babylonian captivity. And a lot of our people, they're worshiping idols, other gods secretly, you know. And when you read Ezekiel 9 and 4, it says, And the Lord Yahweh said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And that's right, and this word mark, is when you go into it, it's from the Hebrew word um that most like it, wrong word. Um when you go into this word mark, it's from the Hebrew word dawa, which means mark as a sign of exemption from judgment. Right? It not only applies for the elect of the nation of Israel, because the elect are the ones that sign and crying for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. They was doing it during the time of Ezekiel's day, and the elect will be doing it in these times as well. You know, so the Lord's going to spare His elect, from judgment. It says, and to the others, to the other angels, He said unto my hearing, Go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have you pity. Slay a ugly old and young, both maids and little children, and a woman. So this scripture, proves that there is no respect of persons with Yahweh Shemon Shai. The Lord judges all age groups. He don't care if you're old or you're young, you're maid, you're a little child or a woman. The Lord can judge this pregnant woman too, because best believe in that flood, um, the first death during the flood, when the flood came, our forefather Noah, he was prophesying that it's gonna rain, it's gonna be a flood. Best believe a lot of these age groups were got judged in that flood, man, including pregnant women, newborn babies, because the Lord judges according to your actions that you have done in the flesh, whether good or bad. So He's really judging that spirit, man. So the Lord is not emotional like a mortal man on earth can be. It says, "But come not near any man upon whom is a mark." So don't come near any man that has that exemption from judgment. And begin at my sanctuary, then it began at the ancient men which were before the house. So right, so the Lord brought the judgment upon these wicked Israelites. You know, and we keep continuing on. It says verse 7, and he said to them, defile the house and fill the course with the slain. Go you forth, and they went forth and slew in the city, man. So the angels, they were getting busy, man. Because the angels are mighty men. They do the will of the Lord on the right hand side and on the left. Because it's a scripture. The angels are very obedient. Psalms 103, verse 20. Bless the Lord Yahweh, ye his angels that excel in strength, that do his commandments, hearkening unto the voice of his word. Right? So the angels, they are obedient and they excel in strength. They're very mighty, you know. So the angels are very do the will of the Lord. It says, um, going back to Ezekiel 9:8, it says, and it came to pass while they were slaying them, and I was left. So Ezekiel, he was left. That I fell upon my face and cried and said, Ah, Yahweh Shai, will thou destroy all the residue of Israel and that pouring out of thy fury upon Jerusalem? Because, you know, it felt like all Israel was being destroyed, you know. But that just shows you that it was a lot of evildoers. And, you know, and when that time comes here, we have to remember that it's more wicked Israelites than it is righteous, you know. So it was a lot of wicked Israelites, man. So Ezekiel felt like the Lord's going to take out all Israel, but that's how much wicked Israelites there were, worshiping other gods, man. It says, verse 9, then say he unto me, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is exceeding great. So iniquity means sin upon sin. So their sins were exceeding great. And the land is full of blood, and the city full of perverseness. For they say Yahweh hath forsaken the earth, and Yahweh not seeth not. Yes, so they don't think the Lord is considering their actions, and they don't think that um, the Lord doesn't see what they're doing. But the Lord sees everything, man. It's a scripture that says that the Lord's eyes are 10,000 brighter than the sun. And we know the Lord's eyes are the angels, so they go to and fro on the earth and seeing what and you know and examine what people are doing in the earth, whether good or bad. To begin on with the Israelites. It says, and they report back to Yahweh Shemon Shai. It says, and as for me also, my eyes shall not spare, neither will I have pity, but I will recompense their way upon their own head. So the Lord pays you back according to your ways, man. And behold, the man clothed with linen, which had an inkhorn by his side, which is talking about an angel. And it's not that he actually had an inkhorn, piece of paper and writing on it. It just goes into how the angels, account for everything. You know, they, you know, they, they report They it says report the matter saying, I have done as thou commanded me. So the angel was destroying a lot of Israelites, man. You know, so and that time is coming back, man. Time of judgment. Uh, this is Revelation 22:12. It says, and behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. Right. So Yahweh Shai is coming back to rewards. You know, um, because it's going to be a reward for the righteous and a reward for the wicked. I think it says that in Proverbs. Says that. Let's see. Maybe in Proverbs 26. If I can remember. Let's see. Let's see. Mm, Let me see. Go to Proverbs 26. And it's like, yeah, I just want to reward godly. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Proverbs 11:31. It says, behold, the righteous shall be recompensed on earth. Much more shall the wicked and the sinner. Right? So recompense means to be paid back. So the Lord is going to pay back the righteous, ultimately with salvation. But much more the wicked and the sinner, what they're going to be rewarded with judgment. You know, so no one escapes the judgment of Yahweh by Shemosai, man. You know, it's lucky, man. My computer just froze. I hate when that happen, man. I would do it when you do a lesson, man. I can't even. It's lucky I can say, man. But yeah, um, yeah. So the Lord's gonna be judging upon, gonna judge the righteous and the wicked. The righteous will be spared from judgment, and the wicked will get judged. You know, Galatians 2:6 and 7 says, "Be not deceived; Yahweh is not mocked. For whatsoever a man sow, that shall he also reap." So yeah, whatever energy you put out in the earth, you're gonna get that same energy back in return. So if you a righteous man in the truth, serving Yahweh by Shemosai, doing the works, you're gonna be paid back with salvation. The hedge protection. The Lord having His favor upon you in the time of Jacob's trouble. But if you were a wicked man, you worship other gods, you would commit adultery, all the unclean foods, what you're gonna reap. You're gonna reap judgment. Gonna suffer. You know, you're gonna die of famine. Starving to death. The Lord gonna have you starve to death. You know, have you being tortured. Not having a hedge of protection, man. So, you know, we want to reap, Lord willing, the righteous, a righteous reward, man. Verse 8 says, "For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting." Right? So we want to sow to the Spirit, man, investing in this truth, doing the works, man. Because we sold to the flesh when we were in the world before we came in the truth. But those that continue in that lifestyle, they're gonna reap corruption, man. You know. So yeah, man. So we wanna be on the Lord's good side when He brings that judgment. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Just want to do a quick lesson on that, and Lord willing, I was edified. And until next time, Shalom.